T.D. Jakes has become one of the most recognizable names in modern Christianity, a man whose life has moved from the struggles of a poor childhood to leading one of the largest churches in America, all while navigating controversy, triumph, heartbreak, and a recent near-death experience that shook his congregation and followers across the globe. His journey is filled with extraordinary highs and devastating lows, and yet it continues to unfold in ways that even he may not have anticipated. Born on June 9, 1957, in South Charleston, West Virginia, Thomas Dexter Jakes was raised in a modest household. His father, Ernest, ran a janitorial business, and his mother, Odith, taught school. Life was difficult, both because of limited finances and the harsh realities of growing up Black in America during that era. He was the youngest of 3 children, and from a very early age, he carried responsibilities that most boys his age never had to bear. He also carried a lisp so heavy that most people assumed he would never become a preacher, but deep inside he already knew what he was called to do. He practiced sermons in his room, preached to trees and stuffed animals, and endured the teasing of classmates who nicknamed him Bible Boy. The name didn't bother him, he simply kept pushing forward. At the age of 10, tragedy began to shape him in ways that would never leave. His father's kidneys failed, and Thomas became a caretaker alongside his mother. Watching his father deteriorate while still being a child himself forced him to grow up quickly, and when his father died 3 years later, he was thrust into manhood before he was ready. He worked jobs to help his family, sometimes not knowing where their next meal would come from, but he never abandoned his preaching. Even in grief and poverty, he carried his calling with him. By 19, he delivered his first official sermon, and though he still battled his speech impediment, people were moved because his words came from lived experience and real pain. He wasn't just quoting the Bible, he was breathing it. In 1981, his life took a pivotal turn when he preached at a revival in Beckley, West Virginia, and met a woman named Sarita. She had already endured her share of pain, her brother had been murdered, and she had survived abuse in past relationships. Yet she and Thomas were drawn together almost instantly. Within 6 months they married, launching what would become not only a lifelong partnership in love but in ministry. Their marriage was soon tested when a devastating car accident left Sarita's legs crushed. Doctors doubted she would ever walk again, but with Thomas's determination and support, she slowly regained her ability. That season forged a bond between them that became unshakable. In 1980, at just 23 years old, Jakes started his first church, Temple of Faith, with only 10 members. The storefront congregation barely had enough money to pay for basic needs, and often he and Sarita collected bottles to buy food. Bills went unpaid, lights were shut off, and water sometimes had to be borrowed, but the preaching never stopped. He worked dangerous shifts at the Union Carbide plant, and later dug ditches for survival, but after each long day, he would stand before a congregation and pour his heart out. His words resonated because he was preaching to people who knew struggle, who knew what it felt like to be overlooked, and he gave them hope. By the late 1980s, Jakes began reaching beyond the pulpit. He launched a radio broadcast called Back to the Bible, which allowed his message to travel into homes that would never otherwise hear him. It was a gamble financially, but it paid off. He became a local voice of encouragement, and soon hundreds tuned in. His rise continued when he joined the Higher Ground Always Abounding Assemblies, led by Bishop Sherman Watkins, who became a mentor and father figure. Under Watkins' guidance, Jakes expanded his influence, and his message began reaching even larger audiences. By the 1990s, his church had outgrown multiple buildings. Moving from small towns into larger cities, he defied expectations by attracting diverse congregations, even leading a church in a mostly white suburb, where his preaching resonated across racial lines. In 1987, he was officially ordained as a bishop, cementing his authority as a leader. But the breakthrough that made him a national figure came in 1993, when his television program, The Potter's Touch, launched. Suddenly his voice reached millions across America and abroad. 3 years later, he relocated to Dallas, Texas, with 50 staff members and their families, to build what would become the Potter's House. The growth was explosive. Within a few years, attendance soared into the tens of thousands, and the church became a phenomenon. State-of-the-art facilities were built, debts paid off in record time, and membership exceeded 30,000. His conferences, particularly Manpower, drew men from around the globe, challenging them to face vulnerability, pain, and healing in ways few pastors had ever dared to address. His partnership with Black Entertainment Television expanded his reach, bringing his sermons into households across America and beyond. Jakes was not content to stay within the walls of the church. He established TDJ Enterprises, producing films, publishing books, and creating music projects that reached millions. His films like Woman, Thou Art Loosed, and Jumping the Broom became hits, and his books sold over 20 million copies worldwide. His ventures earned hundreds of millions in revenue, making him not just a pastor but a media mogul. He also founded initiatives aimed at economic empowerment, affordable housing, and education, underscoring his belief that faith should move beyond words into action. His attempt at a daytime talk show faltered despite Oprah's backing, and critics often questioned the blending of faith with wealth and celebrity. Meanwhile, his family was stepping into their own callings. He and Sarita raised 5 children, all of whom became involved in ministry. His daughter Sarah's story became one of the most inspiring. Becoming a teen mother at 14 could have ended her future, but instead she turned her struggles into a powerful testimony. After divorce and raising her son as a single mother, she found her voice as a blogger, preacher, and author. Eventually, she married Pastor Toure Roberts, and together they built thriving ministries in Los Angeles and Denver. In 2025, Sarah and Toure were named the new leaders of the Potter's House, carrying on the legacy her father had built. Yet even as he poured into communities, storms gathered around his name. In 2024, his name surfaced in court documents related to shocking lawsuits against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Though Jakes was not accused of wrongdoing, speculation swirled online about his connection. Soon after, a convicted sex offender from the 1980s publicly accused Jakes of misconduct, demanding millions to remain silent. Jakes's legal team called the allegations false and extortion, and he countered with a defamation lawsuit. On April 27, 2025, he stood before his congregation and announced that Sarah and her husband Toure would take over as senior pastors of the Potter's House. It was not a retirement, he emphasized, but a rebirth. He would still preach and guide, but the daily leadership would pass to the next generation. Unlike many transitions in megachurches that come abruptly after scandal or crisis, Jakes had carefully planned this moment for years, ensuring transparency and continuity. For Sarah, who once faced shame and struggle as a teen mother, it was a full-circle moment of redemption and empowerment. For Jakes, it was the assurance that his life's work would not end with him, but live on through his children.